Over the centuries, Europe was ruled by monarchs who managed to bring about peace and development to their peoples, achieving their status of greatness and lasting fame. Some of such kings were absolute sovereigns, others were enlightened absolutists, and others derived their right to rule from God. Here's a list of 5 kings who reigned successfully over their kingdoms in Europe. In a chronological order, we start with James I of England. James Charles Stuart was King of Scotland as James VI from the 24th of July 1567 and King of England and Ireland as James I from the union of the Scottish and English crowns on the 24th of March 1603 until his death in 1625. He reigned over all 3 kingdoms for 22 years, a period known after him as the Jacobean era. After the union of the crowns, he based himself in England from 1603, returning to Scotland only once in 1617. James was born on the 19th of June 1566 at Edinburgh Castle to Mary, Queen of Scots, and her second husband, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. James became King of Scots at the age of 13 months on the 29th of July 1567. Given the fact that Queen Elizabeth I was unmarried and childless, James was considered her most likely successor. He offered his support to Elizabeth during the Spanish Armada episode of 1588, although his mother had been executed by Elizabeth's order the previous year. James married Anne of Denmark, the younger daughter of Protestant Frederick II, on the 23rd of November 1589. One of his children was the unlucky royal Charles I. James was proclaimed King of England on the 24th of March 1603 after Elizabeth I died that same day. James VI ruled in England as James I after what was known as the Union of the Crowns, when he became the first monarch to style himself King of Great Britain in 1604. In 1605, he survived a Catholic plot intended to blow up the king and parliament. James believed deeply in the divine right of kings, which brought him into conflict repeatedly with Parliament. James's contribution to England and the world was the authorized King James's version of the Bible. The King James Bible was published by Robert Barker, the King's printer, in 1611. Over the years, it would become a vector for spreading the English language worldwide as the dominant global language, both commercially and culturally. James's reign displayed the traits for political absolutism and led to an uneasy relationship with the Parliament, due partly to the financial irresponsibility of James's court. During his reign, known as the Jacobean Age, the cultural achievements of the Elizabethan age continued in literature, arts, and sciences. James himself was a talented scholar. James died on the 27th of March 1625 and was succeeded by his second son Charles. The next king on our list is Gustav II Adolf of Sweden. He was the King of Sweden from 1611 to 1632 and is credited for establishing the foundations of the modern Swedish state and the rise of Sweden as a great European power. During his reign, Sweden became one of the primary military forces in Europe during the 30 Years' War. Gustav Adolf was born on the 19th of December 1594 at Castle Tre Kronor in Stockholm as the older son of Duke Charles of the Vasa dynasty and his second wife, Christina of Holstein-Gottorp. Upon his father's death in October 1611, the 16-year-old Gustav inherited the throne, being declared of age and able to reign himself at 17 as of 16th of December. He faced 3 simultaneous and ongoing wars of his father with Russia, Denmark, and Poland. These wars provided the opportunity for Gustav to learn the art of war and to become a specialist in that field as a military commander. He was a model for Napoleon I of France and Karl von Clausewitz, who studied and admired Gustav for his warfare strategies. During the 30 Years' War, Gustav Adolf helped the Swedish armies to achieve success and led his nation to great prestige. Gustav married Maria Eleonora of Brandenburg in 1620. She bore her husband a daughter, Christina, in 1626, who later succeeded her father as Queen of Sweden. The Lion of the North, as he was also known, died in the Battle of Lutzen on the 6th of November 1632. He was only 37 years old. He left behind a more powerful Sweden, being named the Great for his contribution in achieving the political and religious equilibrium of power in Europe. We shift now the attention to Louis XIV of France. He was known as Louis the Great, or the Sun King, and he was King of France from the 14th of May 1643 until his death in 1715. He reigned over France during one of its most magnificent periods, becoming the symbol of absolute monarchy of the classical age in Europe. Louis XIV was born on the 5th of September 1638 in the Château de Saint-Germain-en-Laye. His father was Louis XIII and his mother was Anne of Austria. When his father died, Louis became king at the age of 4. During his often harsh and traumatized childhood, his mother served as regent with the help of Cardinal Mazarin. During the minority of Louis XIV, there was a series of civil wars in France from 1648 until 1653, in which the nobles rose in rebellion against Mazarin and the court. When Louis was only 15 and not yet married, he was crowned as king in Rome. In 1660, he married Maria Theresa, daughter of Philip IV of Spain. Louis XIV began his personal reign only in 1661 after the death of Cardinal Mazarin. Shortly after, Louis started reorganizing France through administrative and fiscal reforms. His assistant, chosen to rectify the poor financial situation that France was facing, was Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Louis XIV engaged France in a series of wars which helped his country to become the dominant power on the continent and a threat to other European nations by exerting his supremacy. His dislike of Paris prompted Louis to spend more and more time in Versailles, southwest of Paris, where he built a magnificent palace between 1661 and 1689, moving his government there from Paris in 1682. The king surrounded himself with a variety of significant political, military and cultural figures such as Mazarin, Colbert, Vauban, Molière, Racine, La Fontaine, Charpentier, Marais, Lebrun, Rigaud, Leveux, Mansart, and Charles Perrault. During his reign, Louis became a patron of the arts, encouraged industry, promoted trade, and helped financially with the funding of an overseas empire. France became the envy of Europe for its military and cultural achievements, power and sophistication. French manners, values, goods, and behavior became the model for other nations in Europe that started adopting French as the universal language of the European elite. He died in Versailles on the 1st of September 1715. Looking now to the eastern part of Europe, we find another remarkable king, Peter the Great of Russia, who ruled the Tsardom of Russia and later the Russian Empire from the 7th of May 1682 until his death in 1725. In his attempt to establish Russia as a great nation, he started extensive reforms by creating a strong navy, modernizing the army according to Western standards, secularized schools, and introduced new administrative and territorial divisions of the country. Peter the Great was born Pyotr Alexeyevich on the 9th of June 1672 in Moscow to Tsar Alexis and his second wife Natalia Kirillovna Narishkina. When Peter was 10 years old, he was chosen by the Council of Russian nobles to become Tsar with his mother as regent, due to the fact that Peter's other half-brother, Ivan V of Russia, who was next in line for the throne, was chronically ill and of infirm mind. When Peter was 17, his mother arranged for him to be married to Eudoxia Lopukhina in 1689. The marriage proved to be a failure, and 10 years later, when his wife became a nun, Peter was free to seek other relationships. Following his mother's death in 1694, Peter, aged 22, became an independent sovereign. Ivan V was a joint ruler with Peter, though in name only, so Peter became the only ruler when Ivan died in 1696, when Peter was 24 years old. During his rule, Peter introduced a series of reforms with the aim of modernizing Russia by adopting many of the Western standards of life, especially French manners and clothes style. Peter reorganized the Russian army along modern lines and dreamed of making Russia a maritime power. He also established a program for the industrialization of Russian manufacturing in order to diversify the country's exports. Peter desired to improve his nation's position on the seas, and he attempted to acquire control of the Black Sea by capturing the Ottoman fortress of Azov in July of 1696. 2 years later, Peter officially founded the first Russian Navy base. Peter traveled to Holland to gain practical experience in the largest shipyard in the world. He also went to England, where he saw a Royal Navy fleet review at Deptford. He studied the English techniques of city building he would later use at St. Petersburg. He funded and established his new capital in St. Petersburg by ordering building projects of westernized palaces and buildings designed by Italian and German architects. In 1712, he married again a Polish-Lithuanian peasant, Martha, who converted to the Russian Orthodox Church and took the name Catherine and was crowned as Empress in 1724. By his two wives, Peter had 14 children. Peter acquired territory in Estonia, Latvia, and Finland, and through several wars with Turkey in the south, he secured access to the Black Sea, and in 1709 he defeated the Swedish army. During his rule, Russia became a great European nation, and in 1721 he proclaimed Russia an empire, with Peter acquiring the title of Emperor of all Russia. Peter died on the 8th of February 1725, age 52, having reigned for 42 years. The last king on our list is Frederick the Great. Friedrich II was a Prussian king and military leader who ruled the Kingdom of Prussia from 1740 until 1786, being the longest reign of any Hohenzollern king. He was born to Friedrich William I and his wife Sophia Dorothea of Hanover in Berlin on the 24th of January 1712 and was baptized as Friedrich. Although his father wanted Friedrich to learn religion and pragmatism, he was instead fond of music, literature, and French culture, in contradiction to his father's interest in the art of war. On the 12th of June 1733, the Crown Prince married Elizabeth Christine of Brunswick-Bevern, a Protestant relative of the Austrian Habsburgs, although Friedrich wasn't enthusiastic about the match. In 1740, when his father Friedrich William I died, Prince Friedrich, who was 20 years old, ascended to the throne of Prussia, with his realm consisting of scattered territories and thus unable to exert significant power, a reality Friedrich intended to change. Desiring the prosperous Austrian province of Silesia, Friedrich disputed the succession of the 23-year-old Maria Theresa to the Habsburg lands, while simultaneously making his own claim on Silesia. On the 16th of December 1740, Friedrich invaded and quickly occupied the province, thus triggering the War of the Austrian Succession that lasted from 1740 to 1748 and was the last great power conflict, with the Bourbon-Habsburg dynasty conflict at its heart, and marked the rise of Prussia as a major power. He was able to show his military abilities by taking part in battlefield and using studied strategies, tactics, mobility, and logistics related to warfare. His reign was marked by reforms of the judicial system based on meritocracy, modernization of the Prussian bureaucracy, and civil service. Friedrich died on the 17th of August 1786 in his study at Sanssouci, aged 74. He was one of the most enlightened monarchs of his time who contributed to Prussia's success in securing its leading role in Europe. Once upon a time, there was a French lady who had a passion for fairy tales. She lived during the reign of Louis XIV and was the first author to popularize the term fairy tale. Her name was Marie Catherine and was born in Barneville-la-Bertrand, near Honfleur in Normandy, in 1650 to Nicolas Claude Le Jumel and Judith Angélique Le Costelier. Her father was related to some of the best families of Normandy and had served long in the armies of Louis XIV. Her mother later married the Marquis of Guidin and went with him to Rome. At the age of 16, Marie's father arranged for her to be married to François de la Motte, Baron d'Aulnoy, who was 30 years older than Marie Catherine. He lived in Paris and belonged to the household of the Duke of Vendôme. Unhappy with the high taxes imposed by Louis XIV, the Baron, who was a notorious gambler, expressed his frustration and spoke against the royal measures. Subsequently, in 1669, he was accused of high treason. It turned out that Marie and her mother had plotted against the Baron with the help of their two lovers. Although François was falsely accused, he ended up in the Bastille, imprisoned for 3 years. Fearing he might be facing execution, he eventually was able to prove his innocence, and the two men involved in the conspiracy were instead executed. Facing serious consequences, Marie and her mother decided to flee for their safety. They were able to escape to England not before an arrest warrant had been issued for Madame d'Aulnoy. Whilst the king's officers were searching for her, Marie managed to escape through a window and hid in a neighboring church. For the next 15 years, Madame d'Aulnoy traveled through England, Spain, and Holland. It was rumored that she was working as a spy for France and was only able to return to Paris in 1685. Meanwhile, her mother remained in Spain, living off a pension paid by the king. When Marie returned to France, she was 35 years old and by then an accomplished and well-traveled lady. She started to enjoy the life of Parisian salons in her own home at Rue Saint-Benoît, where she was hosting social gatherings attended by French aristocrats and princes, including her close friend, the essayist and literary critic Seigneur de Saint-Évremont. Possessing remarkable conversational powers and agreeable wit, Madame d'Aulnoy established a literary salon where French ladies entertained themselves by reading and writing tales in a predominantly female environment. In the 17th century, women's role in society was minimal, as they had to fit into the conventional norms. Madame d'Aulnoy proved to be a rebellious and revolutionary spirit who refused to be subservient and obedient. Unable to openly criticize Louis XIV and his regime, Madame d'Aulnoy realized that she could express her strong feelings on the matter by writing fairy tales. She would use many sources to put her stories together, including stories from Pentameron, other different authors, and oral sources. Her fairy tales gave women a voice. Unable to choose their own fortunes and careers, the ladies attending Marie's literary salons found a way to criticize the regime, who would endlessly interrupt them in their pre-established roles. Although her fairy tales have been recently rewritten and adapted for children, at the time they were published, they were intended as a form of entertainment for grown-ups. In 1697 and in 1698, Madame d'Aulnoy published fairy tales and new tales, or fairies in fashion. Instantly successful and popular, her elaborate French salon fairy tales were reprinted numerous times during the 18th century in France and elsewhere. Some of Madame d'Aulnoy's well-known fairy tales were The White Cat, The Bee and the Orange Tree, The Blue Bird, Belle Belle, and The Ram. She also wrote about her experiences in England and Spain, publishing her travel memoirs based on her supposed travels through court life in Madrid and London. Although it is uncertain if these stories are based on facts or vivid imagination, they later became popular. The money she earned by writing and publishing her work was spent supporting her daughters. She had 6 children, but only 2 were acknowledged by their father, the Baron d'Aulnoy. It is fair to assume that Marie was romantically involved with different men, and after the Baron's death, Marie married again Monsieur de Saint-Talbe. Marie Catherine died in her house in Rue Saint-Benoît on the 14th of January, 1705. Her life mirrors her work, a mixture of mysterious happenings and fanciful events that created a fairy tale-like atmosphere rich with beautiful and fantastical imagery. Although today Madame d'Aulnoy's name and work are almost very little known, it is worth mentioning that she started writing fairy tales during a period of time when this type of literary genre was very popular in France. She was an innovative writer who should be praised for her writing abilities, along with more well-known authors such as Charles Perrault, who was himself encouraged by King Louis XIV to write story tales.